Hi, and welcome to the Non-Boss Audits and Investigations. And thank you for joining me for another episode of the Scientology Chronicles. Today, on this episode, we're going to be talking about the forced audit of Mrs. Barbara Winslow. So let's jump right into it. This is dated May 22nd, 1964. And this comes from Washington, D.C. Mrs. Barbara Winslow of Lansdowne, Pennsylvania, wrote to the Federal Bureau of Investigation on April 28, 1964, asking about the Scientology Center. Her letter was referred to the Food and Drug Administration, and a reply to her letter was sent on May 22, 1964. Division of Case Supervision reported this to us and asked that we contact Mrs. Winslow to get some facts about Scientology and to determine if she might make a good witness in the pending case. I had a very difficult time contacting Mrs. Winslow. After I finally contacted her, I found out the reason for her difficulty. She is in the process of getting a divorce from her husband, Mr. Ray Winslow. For 5 weeks, the matter was pending. Mrs. Winslow and her 21-month-old boy are now living with her parents in Lansdowne. Although the divorce has not yet been granted, her husband is married again to an older woman than he is and who is an ardent Scientologist. Mrs. Winslow and her father and mother were suspicious of anyone coming to the door and would not answer the door. They were afraid it might be some process server or lawyer sent there by her husband, who now lives in New York City. Mrs. Winslow gives the appearance of a good witness, although the basic concepts of Scientology are somewhat confusing to her. We would suggest that she be interviewed again if you wish to use her testimony, since she may be able to recall more accurate and pointed information. Mrs. Winslow said that her husband is now 31 years of age, and he became interested in Scientology at the age of 21. She said that after she married him, she said that after she married him, he became more ardent in Scientology, and finally they got to the point where they argued all the time. She became very depressed, and for that reason, she is now getting a divorce. She said that she and her husband used to go to the Scientology Center in New York City, which she said is on 3rd Avenue. She said her and her husband used to go to the Scientology Center in New York City, which she said is on 3rd Avenue, and she is not sure whether it is at 67th or 87th Avenue. She said that she went to just one meeting and there was one speaker at that time. She said folding chairs were set up in the room and there was an offering box with a little sign on it. She said she found the meeting very confusing and hard to follow what was going on. She said people could ask questions. She said that the people who attended the meeting appeared to her to be lonely people or people who needed help, but they had come to the wrong place. She said they were mostly an quote unquote oddball or beatnik type of a person. She felt as though she didn't fit in with the group. In spite of in spite of her feelings, Mrs. Winslow began processing. The same site was used for this. She said that there were 2 absolutely plain rooms off the larger room used for the meeting. She said the larger room was not much larger than the combined living and dining rooms in the row house where she lives with her parents. The plain rooms had no pictures, no drapes, only a desk and 2 chairs. People who do the processing are called auditors. The fee for processing is $25 for 3 hours. It is recommended by the cult that one take 300 hours of processing. She doesn't remember just how much processing she got, but she said it was between $200 and $250 worth. She finally stopped because she became so depressed mentally that she was crying every day. On her second or third visit, Mrs. Winslow said she had to take some sort of an IQ test, and for several times after that. She said that Scientology claims it can raise one's IQ, and so frequent tests are given to determine this. She found this very depressing mentally. While being processed, she said she had to hold on to two metal cans, about the size of cans which contain cat food, one in each hand. She was told to squeeze the cans tightly. The auditor asked, "What have you done to someone?" The auditor observes a needle attached to the meter and cans that he is using. If there is no reaction on the meter, the auditor asks next, "What has someone done to you?" As soon as the meter shows some reaction, you are supposed to talk about that subject. Mrs. Winslow said that she dreaded going for processing so much that she found excuses for not going, such as being sick or having to work. She said you are supposed to tell the auditor if you don't like his looks or if you don't like him in any way. She said the auditor will tell you to get up from your chair and go over and put your hand on the wall. If you don't do just as he tells you, he scolds you and makes you sit down right opposite of him and go through the same motions that he does. She said the auditor would say, "Stand up, walk over and touch the wall, and touch the wall, and turn around," all in a quiet but very commanding tone of voice. She said that once she tried to run out of the room and the auditor forcibly made her stay in the room. The auditor would say also, "To make the able more able." She said the auditor wouldn't let her go out of the room until the needle on the meter didn't register anymore. She often became so depressed mentally that she would cry in the room. Mrs. Winslow said that she didn't know of any religious angle of Scientology. She said, as far as she could see, they had no religion. She said they never used the word love or hate or God or Bible. Neither did Mrs. Winslow ever hear any claims of Scientology curing physical diseases. She said it was supposed to help by bringing up everything since childhood. She said her husband claimed that he could remember the day he was born. She said the auditor was always stressing, quote unquote, awareness. Mrs. Winslow said that she had to hold the cans every time that she was processed. She said that an amateur may process another amateur. She said that ordinarily the door to the larger room was always closed and locked, and she could never understand this. She said that half the time the auditors used such jargon that she didn't know what they were talking about. According to Mrs. Winslow, the term quote unquote pre-clear is applied to one just starting out in processing. The term clear is used when everything is off the mind, and she said there are very few clears. According to Mrs. Winslow, the term pre-clear is applied to one just starting out in processing. The term clear is used when everything is off the mind, and she said there are very few clears. She said that you don't have to be a clear in order to be an auditor. She said that another cardinal rule of Scientology is that you can't process anyone free of charge. Everyone, including friends and relatives, have to pay money. Mrs. Winslow said that when she married her husband, he owed $1,600 for processing, and she paid off $700 of the bill as she hates debts hanging over her head. He owes this bill to Andy Paraglon in Detroit, Michigan. Mrs. Winslow said that her husband, a musician, and at present he is playing in Philadelphia at the Golden Boy. She referred to him as an oddball and difficult to live with. She said that the whole cult is hard-headed. She said that you can't reason with them. Mrs. Winslow said that Dolores Lambert was an auditor in New York. Also, Bob and his wife Jan were auditors. She has forgotten their last name. Her husband's present wife is from England, where she began Scientology, and she's older than he is. Mrs. Winslow showed me an article about Scientology, which appeared in the Saturday Evening Post on March 21st, 1964, page 81. Also, she gave me a photocopy of an article in the New York Times dated December 8th, 1963. She gave me 2 other pieces of literature, both put out by the Hubbard Communication Office. One is called You Can Be Right, and the other is Catholic View of Scientology. According to Mrs. Winslow, she could still go back for processing. She said that if the Food and Drug Administration wanted any particular information and wanted to pay her expenses, she could probably get it, since as far as she knows, she is still in good standing with the organization. She said she could have given us much more literature if only she had saved it. So here we are, another family broken up, another marriage ending in divorce, another account of a forced audit, locking you in the room until they get the desired answer, the desired outcome. So if they keep you in there until they get their desired answer to the questions of what have you done to someone or what has someone done to you, how is that helping anybody? Because you're going to tell them whatever the hell you think they want to hear because you want the hell out of that locked room. Tell me in the comments what your thoughts are regarding this story. And remember, no more kids in Scientology. Kids cannot consent. And remember to spread love and kindness wherever you go. And I will catch you in the next one.